Science, exercise, nutrition, health, energy, passion. 1 year, no beer. This is the 1 year no beer podcast, where you will find all the latest tips, tricks, and hacks for a way to live better.
Laura, welcome to the 1 year no beer podcast.
Thank you, Andy. How are you?
Very good. I've just dropped a pencil, but let's not worry about that. Right, well, I thought I'd get you on the show because just not last week, the week before, we both appeared in the Change Your World conference up in Inverness, which was a massive success, by the way. I absolutely loved being a part of it. And whilst waiting in the wings, Ruri and I picked up on a lot of the speeches. A couple of the ones that really stood out, David Hamilton, I Heart Me. I'm a massive fan of that book. It's somewhere on my bookshelf around here. And then your talk about shining offline and about our relationship with our phones. And what was super interesting, from the moment you started talking, I kept thinking, this is just like our relationship with alcohol. It's almost identical in so many ways. So I was desperate to get you on the show just to share your ideas because it was a brilliant talk. It really inspired me to get me thinking. I've implemented several of the ideas already in my own household, my own family, because I think it is so important that we all transform our relationship not only with alcohol but also with our phones. So Over to you. I thought I'd just sort of bring you on, just tell us a bit about who you are and what you actually do.
Okay, cool. Well, funny, I had the same. When I read a bit more about what you lot do, I told Anna, my business partner, they do what we do, but just with booze. So it's true. And the lovely thing as well, I think for me and for you guys, is that it's our own personal journey that has brought us to doing what we do. So that's really exciting as well. We launched a couple of years ago, and it was on the back of my own breakdown. When my daughter was born, I had to go back to work very quickly. She was 4 months old. I was a PR marketing consultant. I was self-employed, and I'd always had a bit of a funny relationship with my email, with my inbox. I had a pull to it for years, for as long as I'd been using it. But when I had to go back to work and I had the lovely smartphone in my hand, quite quickly it became apparent to me that the juggling wasn't working, because I was trying to do everything all the time, and I hit an all-time low, and I ended up with quite severe insomnia. So I was on sleeping tablets for 10 weeks, but I didn't want to be on them. And when I changed GP, the new GP suggested, I told him that I'd practiced some mindfulness in the past, but I'd done an 8-week course, and I'd sort of, I got an awful lot out of it first time round, but I'd sort of fallen off the horse a bit. And he said, well, we'll get you some CBT, but in the meantime, revisit mindfulness because the benefits are comparable. So I started to meditate regularly. I found a local meditation group. I live in Twickenham, and started to regularly meditate. And I found that gave me a break from my phone, which was brilliant. But it also gave me some clarity because I had a lot more headspace. And quite quickly, I started to realize it's this thing in my hand that's causing all my problems. So I realized I needed to make some changes, and I started to experiment with the way that I've been using it in my life. I was the sort of person who, say I was always working from home, and say in the morning I would get up, this is before kids, I would have checked my email on my laptop, and then I would have gone for a run. And when I got back from the run, I would have checked my email before I got in the shower, and then I'd get out of the shower and I'd be in my towel and I'd check my email again. So it was really habitual for me. It was a constant thing. So I started to change how I used it, and simple things like I started wearing a watch, because I recognized that I was using the excuse to find out what time it was to look at my phone all the time. So I started to wear a watch. I took email off my phone completely. I got a work phone and a personal phone, so the boundaries were a bit clearer, and a few other things. I came off social media, and the benefits started to show themselves quite quickly. And when I talked to people in my life, friends, family, about what I was doing, it really resonated with people. And some people really close to me were really struggling themselves, but they'd never spoken about it. I can't get away from my work email, and, meeting friends for coffee on a Saturday, and they'd be crying because they were overwhelmed. And I could totally relate to that and started to share what I was doing. And then I had a light bulb moment on a train where I sat down on a commuter train one morning, and I sat beside a girl, and she was flitting between her apps, but there was no purpose to it. It was
Yeah, it
just
was
very sort
just
of mindless
mindless.
living.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, that looks exhausting watching it, because I'd made a conscious effort when I was commuting, because I didn't commute that often, to just use it as an opportunity to daydream or meditate or whatever. So that day I saw the girl on the way in, and then on the way out I sat beside a bloke. I'll never forget this. I can see him now in my mind's eye. He was watching Sherlock Holmes with Benedict Cumberbatch on his iPad, and he was playing solitaire at the same time on his phone. And I had this real light bulb moment where I was
Yeah.
like, in my head I actually said, switch off, slow down. They were the words that came to me. And then I've been sort of investigating the whole digital detox thing for a while. And I've been really I studied social psychology, and I'd always wanted to be an anthropologist. So it was always on my radar, people and behaviors and stuff. And then I decided, right, there seems to be a lot of media coverage and research about this topic, but nobody's going out there and creating a bit of dialogue and getting people to think about it and talk about it. So that's what we do now. We go out to companies and we get people in the room to start to really investigate their relationships with their devices and the great things about them and the not so great things about them, and help them to see that by making some small behavioral changes, you can make sure that you're in control rather than feeling like this technology is controlling you.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, even just to wind back to a few things you said there, I mean, that habitual checking of the phone before, as soon as you get up, after a run, when you get out the shower, I mean, I wouldn't mind betting that is the vast majority of people are in that zone. And it might not be email they're checking, but it certainly might be their social media feed. It might be, if it's not emails, is it WhatsApp, and you can just sort of see this, we've both got young families as well, and you've got the younger generation coming up as well as the older generation obviously getting into this technology. And I just keep looking around thinking, I'm struggling to believe that this is right, if you know what I mean. At a fundamental level, something's starting to go completely wrong or being completely misaligned. Whilst, again, social media and these things can be amazing in the right hands. I think, the one Be a Community is a brilliant example of this. I mean, I've seen the power of it before my very eyes to help transform lives. But then on the flip side, when it becomes this mindless thing, this thing that starts to take over your life, it can be very damaging. And I guess that's what you've started to discover.
I like the comparison to alcohol, but I suppose there's a couple of things that I wanted to focus on. The first one is that arguably you don't need alcohol in your life to survive. It's a thing that we've had in our culture that is like a treat, or it's an added thing. It's not necessary. It's not like food. We don't need it for our sustenance. This technology, some people could argue that you don't need it to survive, but I believe that you do these days. And if you want to get on in the world of work, for example, you have to have some sort of connectivity. And some people would argue that in order to live a full social life, that you need to have some sort of social media. I wouldn't agree with that in the same sense, but I definitely think when it comes to the business world, there's a connectivity because of our email usage and the rest of it, and the fact that we're given smartphones as part of our benefits package. We need to be connected through that. The other thing, though, is when it comes to alcohol, we all know there's a lot of information out there about the negative impact that alcohol can have on us, on our health. And the thing that makes this technology quite different is that there has been up till quite recently, there's not been a lot of information out there about the negative impacts this tech is having on us. And there's been a sea change in the past 6 months or so where people from Silicon Valley, like Sean Parker, co-founded Facebook, who isn't with Facebook anymore, are now coming out to say, there's an addictive aspect to this technology. There's a seduction. There are a lot of us who are very clever in Silicon Valley working to make sure this stuff is irresistible and that it hooks you back in. And now it means that all us users, drugs and technology use the same to distract our consumers. All us users are starting to become a bit more aware about the way that we're being manipulated. And it's about informed choice.
Yeah.
Somebody wants to wake up in the morning and use their phone as their alarm clock and be on Facebook like within a couple of minutes of waking up, and it doesn't make you feel in any way stressed or overwhelmed or whatever, go for your life. Check Facebook first thing. But for a lot of people, that's creating an overwhelm, and there's a reason why you're pulled into Facebook because of the manipulation and etc. So I think for me, the exciting thing about this is that the industry are starting to come out and speak about the importance of creating an awareness around the addictive aspects, etc. And it means that people can make informed choices, which we all need to be able to do,
Yeah, exactly. And it is, I mean, I've even noticed it, just we're jumping around a little bit, but in schooling now, for example. So like my daughters will come home and it feels a little bit like, this just feels a bit like lazy teaching in some ways. It's like they're pushing them back online all the time. Instead of reading like a physical book, it's like go online and read your book online. And that just doesn't sit very well with me, because it's just pushing them back towards the tech all the time. I think there's definitely, as you say, there's a mismatch at the moment between like the science that's coming out to suggest actually this stuff is quite addictive and we've got to be very mindful of it, versus all the exciting stuff of, wow, we can put all the textbooks now online and then we can actually get the children to read online. But actually I don't think they're realising that what they're doing is actually they're potentially creating a monster down the line, because they're just almost pushing people towards, more and more tech, more and more online.
Exactly. And it's that whole tech for tech's sake thing.
Yeah.
And the CEO of Apple spoke out at the end of last year, and he said he doesn't have any kids himself, but he said, I don't want my nephew on social media, and I think schools need to really consider how they use technology in the classroom. And I was on a panel at the Mental Wealth Festival last year. It was a digital detox panel, and we're not about detox, we're about mindful conscious use. But I sat beside Carl Honoroy, who's like the king of slow living. Carl's got a TED Talk that's been watched like 2.4 million times, and his books have been translated into 37 languages, and he's all about slowing down. And he works with a lot of schools, and the technology and the speed at which we live is really important to him and his messaging. And in the audience, there was a young lady. She was like in her early 20s, and they were talking about the benefits of tech and how tech can be used for good in the classroom. And she said, well, my sister is like 16, and the teacher communicates to her through this app for her homework updates and all this sort of stuff. And I think that's a really effective use of technology. And Carl's response was, well, it could be, but if she's being asked to go back to the device for school, once she is on that device, her self-control to not end up then on Instagram, on Facebook,
exactly,
lost in the rabbit hole of online life, that's quite hard as for a child.
Yeah.
Is that you could see the girl then really thinking about the process of what the teacher and the school was asking her to do. And I thought, what a great way to position it. We're driving people back to technology, but we're not thinking about the holistic impact that this technology is having when we're pointing them back. And as a parent, like my daughter's 5, my son's not 2 yet, but Sadie only started school in September. And my experience of technology now, because she's so young, is that it's more about information overload from various sources. You're getting emails and WhatsApps from the school communicating you, and sometimes it feels like it's not a very streamlined approach. And I don't know, so I do definitely think that tech can be used for tech's sake, and that people need to pause and step back and think, is this the best solution? It has a place and it can add great benefit, but should we be using this in place of whatever else?
Like a book.
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing. That sort of stuff frustrates me a little bit, and that's what I'm saying. There's sort of mismatch at the moment. There's all the excitement of tech, and people are like, look, we can use it for all this stuff. But actually, that is the key point, is that's what I'm saying. You've got children or teenagers, for example, and then you're pushing them back to their devices for school. And guess what's going to happen? They're going to open their device and they're going to get sucked into Instagram or Facebook or WhatsApp, and you're just creating that cycle. And I genuinely think that you're at the real vanguard of this movement, a bit like we are in many ways at the vanguard of the whole alcohol-free movement.
High five?
Yeah. There we go. A little cheeky
Brilliant.
Virtual high five. But I do think that the 3 big trends are going to be going alcohol-free, going plant-based, and changing your relationship with technology and your phone. I think they're the big 3 trends that are going to happen over the coming years, because people are starting to work it out actually in their best and most accomplished lives. There is a place for technology, but it has to be kept in its place. It should not be this all-consuming. And as you say, these people are super clever. You've got the cleverest minds in the land creating these little dopamine machines that just suck us in. It's like yourself. How many times have I logged in to do some like deep style work, and I know if I even go near Facebook, that's it. Before I know it, I've gone down this rabbit hole and we've got this wonderful community on Facebook, and I love it. And I love going on there, and I'm on there a lot to support the community, which I really enjoy. But again, I have to manage that. Otherwise, I could just lose the whole day down a Facebook rabbit hole, as it were. So I think that's what I really like about what you're doing as well. It's not this abstinence thing. It's not detox, throw the phones away. It's like, let's learn to live with them, how more mindfully. And then just on that note, what sort of tips and tricks would you suggest for our listeners?
Well, funny you ask that. I don't know who's actually going to watch this video, but I've got my special box of
All
tricks.
right, yeah, I like the special box. Yeah, that
Now,
made an appearance in the speech.
one of them is a has an audio element, so I'll use that one for now.
Yeah.
And anybody who's watching can see what this is. It's a hooter. So this hooter is meant to signify notifications. So, the ping is like everywhere.
Yeah.
And it feels like somebody's constantly, whether it be your inbox going off or your apps on your phone alerting you or whatever, it's constant. And the interruption that we feel, the distraction that gives us, and the sense of overwhelm. So basically, you can turn those off. Doesn't have to keep going off all day. Just go in, and they're set to default notify you. So you can go in and turn off your notifications, which means that you then choose when to go in. Because rather than the phone going, hello, hello,
Yeah.
hello, and you going it means that you choose when to check. And it gives you a sense of control. So that's one of the simplest things you can do. The other one, which actually this might have a bit of no, it doesn't. Oh, a wee bit. This is an alarm clock. In our workshops, we always ask how many people use their phone as their alarm, and it's the actual stat is 80% in research that's done externally. But we find in our workshops, people are normal because it is about 80% of the hands that go up.
Yeah.
So one of the most simplest things you can do is get yourself an alarm clock or a small child, and remove the temptation of checking your phone. Because why is it bad? Right, your alarm goes off at 10 to 7. And you turn it off and it's there right in front of you. You haven't even put your toe on the floor and you're in your work email or you're in Facebook or Instagram. And all these things, they don't always put us in a brilliant mood. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So if there is an element of stress now, you're thinking, God, actually, I do that. It does make me feel a bit rubbish before I get out of bed. Well, remove the temptation, get it out of your room, and bring some consciousness to when you're going to go online. So there are two really simple things that everybody can do.
Yeah, and I remember actually on your talk you were saying about, would you invite Donald Trump, your ex-boyfriend, and one of your work colleagues into your bedroom like every evening before you go to bed? And it's so true, isn't it?
Exactly. There's a lot of research, and there has been for years, about blue light and melatonin levels and how the screen is like interfering with the production of melatonin. So you can't, and I get all that. That's fine. But for me, for as long as I had a device, it wasn't about that. It was about the stimulation of my mind.
Yeah.
As you say, you're inviting whoever you've looked at on Facebook, whatever you've read on email, all into your room just before you're meant to be settling down. That's not part of a ritual to get ready to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing, it encroaches in on everything, doesn't it? That's the thing. It's normally the last thing before people see before going to bed, and the first thing they see when waking up. And I think what you're doing is wonderful, because it is just that mindfulness, really, isn't it? I mean, mindfulness, I think, is a wonderful skill. I mean, we use this a lot through One Beer. We heavily promote it because it gives us that, gap between stimulus and response. And that's what it feels like around our phones. Like the first thing I did after your talk was to get rid of all notifications, as you just suggested there. And that's a game changer right there. What a difference that's made when I can't see the WhatsApp, number counter, or I can't see the Facebook number counter. And then I have to decide to go in there and look. Just that little tweak has made a big difference. And then we've implemented a thing called No Tech Sunday, where I have a complete break. So that's a bit of detox. I know that's not necessarily what you're all about, but for me, it's good. That's good for me, because I think I needed to get some sort of recovery time, from being online and getting, buried into the laptop. So really that's for me, but I think it's still a nice thing for the girls and my family to be a part of, just to show them that actually there are days when we're all together, we don't need the phone.
And I think as well, though, that we're not anti detox, because there is a place for a detox. But for me, it's what's more powerful, and this is where the mindfulness comes in as well, because we're rooted in mindfulness too. It's about when you then go to turn back on. What is that feeling? How does your body feel? What's the reaction? It gives you a much clearer idea of your relationship with the technology and the potentially negative impact it could be having on your life. Because for me, my inbox is my pull, so I try and be off my inbox most of the day to focus on my work or whatever I'm doing. But I can feel the physiological changes in my body within 5 minutes, where I'm about to turn my inbox on and get those emails. I can feel it, and I have a very complex relationship with it. So I've now got a very mindful approach, and I think it's taking the step away from it. When you come back to it, think about that engagement and how that feels, and it just makes you more aware. And the mindfulness thing as well, your point about how those three things are going to be trends: the plant, the alcohol, and the tech. For me, mindfulness is at the root of all of this, because the growth in the practice of mindfulness means that the consciousness and the removal of autopilot and the pausing is much, much more part of us. And it's that awareness that makes us able to make informed choices, I think, because it's not just we're just doing what we do, we're just drinking because we drink. We're stopping, we're pausing, and we're thinking about the consequences of our behaviours.
Yeah, and that's absolutely brilliant, and it's so true. And this is exactly what we're trying to do around alcohol. It's the same thing, isn't it? It's just giving people that space, whether that's through like a mini detox or more awareness through mindfulness, to actually realise when they come back. And that was the key part that you said there. When you come back to your device, you start to notice what the sort of effect it's really having on you. And you only ever discover that if you do become more mindful, or you do take a little bit of a break, or whatever it is. It's the same with alcohol. You only ever realise that when you take a break and you go, wow, that's how I'm meant to feel. And then lots of people will go back to drinking, for example, and then realise they feel awful. Yeah. But because now they've seen the other side, they're much quicker to come back to an alcohol-free challenge. And I guess it's the same around the tech. That if you get that bit of space and you are mindful, and then you go back and you can feel your butterflies in your stomach and the anxiety building up because you're staring at an inbox, I think you'll be a lot quicker to remove yourself from that and go, whoa, I didn't believe, because I think when you're so wrapped up in it, that's another key thing that you said. It's that mindless autopilot, isn't it? Yeah. Mindless autopilot of drinking, mindless autopilot of tech. I'm stuck in it. I'm buried in my Facebook, and you need a break. So I think that's why it's even more important for all of us to shine offline and experiment with these things. And also another thing, so I'm on a roll. We are big challengers of conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom says you need to drink alcohol to have fun and be cool and be sexy and all those things. Not true. And I think conventional wisdom at the moment is in danger of saying you've got to be on your smartphone all the time. You've got to be connected all the time. You've got to be available. And that's just not true.
And this is where we've started moving into organisational change, and businesses that we've been working with at a workshop level now want to actually go in and see, how are our staff behaving, and what negative impact is the way that they're using their technology at work having on them. And let's get them to a place where there is more space and pause in the day, where they're using their email in an effective way, where there's more face-to-face communication, where they feel they can walk away at the end of the day and have a rest. And again, there's this sort of tech, everything needs to be tech, and we need to be constantly emailing each other. And when you pick up the phone to somebody, they're like, why are you ringing me, you weirdo? But at the end of the day, we are asking businesses to kind of remove themselves from the status quo of what's become normal. And it's just the same. You and I are meant to be together. Because the same. Honest to God. This normality of this overly teched working life. No, we're humans. We have to interact. We have to be together. That's what we're meant to do. We're not meant to be constantly communicating over technology. It has a place, and it can complement our working lives beautifully, but put it in its place, and let's shake things up a bit and make sure that people get into work and they want to be there and they're rested because they've not been on their flipping phone all night, and they can engage in meetings and really look into each other's eyes and brainstorm properly and be on it and not distracted and pulled away by their devices. And, the potential, I think, is massive once people get a really strong handle on this stuff.
Yeah, and I'm so pleased that the corporate world is starting to embrace this, because it is so important. Because again, this is the whole back to the tech for tech's sake. It's just crept into our world that people expect you to be available on email 24/7. What's that all about? You can't just leave work at 6 o'clock. At 10 o'clock, you could be getting an email, of something stressful, or a WhatsApp, and it's this 24/7. No one's getting a break, even at weekends. I mean, I was always lucky in my job. It didn't follow me into the weekends, but I know of many, many jobs that are consistently weekends and holidays. They're still feeling like they're being hunted down. That's just not good for you, is it? That anxiety and that stress and the overwhelm that brings.
There's a reason why stress at work is a huge thing, and burnout is massive, and mental health issues. And I believe that one of the biggest reason is this technology. Because you can't disconnect. And the overwhelm and overload, and we work with a consultant psychiatrist called Dr. Ian Drever. Ian talks about the fact that the brain hasn't evolved since caveman. And yet the amount of information we're having to process today, the way that we live our lives is totally different. And the way the brain is reacting to that and what it's doing to our actual physiology is startling. And the amount of senior executives he's treating who have got sleep disorders, anxiety disorders, panic disorders, they're overloaded. And it's all back down to this technology. With some small changes and some conscious behaviour, you can improve it for yourself.
Yeah, and here's another thing as well. There's a guy called Carl Newport. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He wrote a great book called Deep Work. Yeah.
Right, have you and I not had this conversation?
No, I'm not sure.
Oh my God, I read that book about 4 months ago and it changed my life.
It's a great book, isn't it? But the whole thesis of that book is just at a time when like deep work and like these real big breakthroughs, they're most valuable. It's becoming so rare because no one's spending time doing deep work because they're constantly half distracted by their bloody phones. Yeah. People are not making these breakthroughs. So his thesis really is that if you can cultivate deep work, you're going to be like the real leader, the thought leaders, the influencers of the next generation, because you're going to be one of the few people that is actually doing it.
Exactly. And one of the things that he talked about doing, a lovely example of flipping society and how we live in this connected culture on its head. Everybody spends a commute on their phones. Well, Cal Newport says, let's spend the commute on deep work. Yeah. Let's spend that 45 minutes to an hour planning tomorrow, or drilling down what you've done today, or focusing your mind on a really difficult report that you couldn't get done at work because you were so distracted by everything else. Let's flip it. Let's not take breaks from distraction. No, let's take breaks from, what is it he says? Let's not take breaks from distraction. Let's not take breaks from focus. Let's take breaks from distraction. Flip it. Why are we all distracted all the time? Let's turn it on its head. But it's a cultural thing, and it's managing expectations, and this needs to be a top-down thing. There's no point us going out and workshopping and Johnny coming out going, right, I'm going to work offline on my email and only check my inbox 4 times a day, and I feel really empowered that I'm going to be able to do deep work and blah, 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 when his line manager expects him to respond within 5 minutes.
Exactly.
This is an organisational thing that there needs to be change from the top down and from the bottom up, and that's what we're starting to do, and that's where it's getting really exciting.
Yeah, it is, and that's, again, it's just wonderful to see that these big organisations are embracing this, because they've got the smart people in there. They're working it out, actually. They're burning out their own staff who are not making the breakthroughs, who are not doing the deep work, because they're connected all the time. But I think, again, once this science starts to come through and people like yourself, there is going to be this big trend. There's going to be this big step away from it again. And I think there'll be some real decent barriers put up around a working day, for example, because they're going to realise that for people to make these big breakthroughs, we need rid of these phones. Again, there's always a place for tech, but it's the distraction, I think, is the problem. And then just to sort of wrap it up, where can we find out more about you? I know you do a lot in the corporate space, but where can we find out more about you as an individual or as a corporate?
Okay, so the website shineoffline.com, and there's information there about what we do. I'm Psychology's magazine and Now Live Events are hosting a night of Laura Willis Shining Offline on the 12th of September. So the tickets aren't available yet, but it's in Conway Hall in Holborn in London, so people can come along to that. And I'll basically run a version of the workshop that night so people can experience how they can shine offline themselves. And that's it, really. All the details of contacting us and everything are on the website. Perfect.
And we'll put all this in the show notes as usual. But Laura, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think a lot of our members are really going to get a lot from this, because I think this is the type of information, like it was for me when I first listened to your speech, that I hadn't really thought of before. It's one of these sneaky ones that's just in our, it's formed this relationship in all our lives, and we're not really questioned it maybe until now. So I think this would be a great podcast and a really good listen for all our members. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura.
See you soon. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the 1 Year No Beer podcast. For a full list of episodes and to join in the challenge yourself, head on over to oneyearnobeer.com. oneyearnobeer.com.